Welcome to this day, significant and celebratory for multiple reasons. First and most famously, it's Mother's Day, and happy Mother's Day to you all. Far from being a mere hallmark holiday we often take it to be, the origins of Mother's Day are inseparably tied to a proclamation from 1870, a time of polarization, violence, and split identity, by an activist named Julia Ward Howe, who called for an International Women's Congress to heal that division. We are tossed on the tide of austerity measures, and the storm gathers around the nuclei of corporate lobbying, and as capital confused with free speech. Anonymous donors fund politicians who cut money to education and codify discrimination. The interest-compelled growth in our growth economy may actually be nothing more than a growing apart from each other and from our planet, even more than in Mother's Day 1870, our relevant agencies may seem to have a say in many great human questions. The questions, however, are still ours to ask and answer. They can never be taken from us as long as we do not settle on the answers that leave us waiting or wanting. The speaker we're honored to bring you today has studied and faced these questions comprehensively and unblinkingly. Within a few chapters of his recent work, Sacred Economics, the ambient questions became startlingly lucid, and then, once teased out into our vision, the many possible answers of the past and future line up to meet them. An introduction to decaying interest currencies, a commons-backed monetary system, the real potential of a gift economy, and an exposition of the strange dollar-imposed substitutability of all human relations that we daily feel meet each other in his work. Charles Eisenstein is an author who ends the book with steps that can be taken, potent because of their respect for the past, present, and planet. He is an expert for the era of Occupy. We are indebted, though it may be a very different kind of debt, to his presence today, and we hope that you find his words of great interest, a very different kind of interest. So let us celebrate Mother's Day, for the mother of our mind, human culture, for the mother of our abundance, planet Earth, and certainly not least, for our own mothers, who bring the best of both. Let us celebrate and give our gratitude, too, to the UNC students who attended an alternative commencement, and who will inherit a world not of Bloomberg, but of their own visionary creation. Finally, let us celebrate the gift of time and knowledge from author Charles Eisenstein, who is here to give us a talk on swing set repair. Just kidding.
Thanks. The acoustics are good here, so I think I'm just going to speak unamplified. And if you can't hear me, just put your hand in your ear and go, eh? Is that? So I would like actually to thank my mother publicly for, well, this isn't being videotaped, or is it? Oh, there it is. I'm on. But you know, I think all of us, I mean, Mother's Day kind of makes sense because here our mothers do so much for us, from gestating us and giving birth, usually with great labor and pain, and then nursing us and feeding us and taking care of us. And, even as a father, and I was a single dad for quite a while, so I really had a lot of hands-on time with little kids, babies, changing a lot of diapers. It's so much work to raise a child. And, you know, the child doesn't do anything to earn all of this. Like, I didn't earn being nursed. I didn't earn being born. I couldn't say, well, I deserve that, Mom, because of all of those things that I did to help out around the house. Tie my own shoes. You know, like, no, I didn't earn any of that. There's no way that I could possibly repay my mother for all of the beautiful things that she's done for me, and that's why it's nice to have a day where we just kind of touch into that gratitude that we're all born into, because simply of having had a mother, even if you didn't have a mother, even if you were an orphan, somebody took care of you for really no good reason. Like maybe someone paid them to take care of you, but what good reason was there for society to pay them to do that? It's really a gift. That's the only way to say it, is that our existence here on earth is a gift. My children receive gifts from me without having earned it, and I don't expect them to pay me back. And I don't want them to pay me back. My role is to give to them. The same kind of gratitude, I think we can touch that same kind of gratitude when we look at Mother Earth, our big mother, who also gives us so much without our having earned it. Water. Like we didn't earn water, we didn't earn the air that the trees make for us, we didn't earn sunlight, we didn't earn the sun. All of these things are given to us. That's why I think that there's something really primal about gratitude, which is the feeling of having received and the desire to give in turn. It's our nature to want to give, because we are gifted so much ourselves. You may have had the experience of being in a situation where you're not able to give for some reason. Maybe you're in a job that doesn't recognize your gifts, or a relationship where your gifts aren't being received. And that situation, even if you might be well paid and well taken care of in every way, that situation becomes intolerable. It's painful to be in that situation. A lot of money can compensate for that pain for a while, but eventually no amount of money is enough. So what sacred economics is about is, like, how do we build an economic system, a money system, that reflects this basic truth of existence, the truth of gratitude, the truth that we are here because we've received so much, and that our purpose on this world is to give in turn. Because the money system we have today denies that truth. In theory, it should encourage that truth. In theory, it says, yeah, the way you make money is by giving your gifts to society, by making widgets that somebody else wants, by growing food that somebody else wants, and they pay you for it. And if you make something that nobody wants, no one will pay you for it. So money is supposed to channel our energy toward creating things that are a gift to another person. And that sounds very naive. That's simply because money today kind of does the opposite. You may have noticed that money tends to channel your energies away from things that are going to be truly of service to this planet. There's not a lot of money in, say you want to go into wetlands restoration, or say you want to protect the forests in the mountains here from being clear-cut, or to stop a mountaintop removal operation, or to, we're building new roads through the Amazon, and we want to stop that from happening so that indigenous tribes don't get exterminated. There's lots of things that are louder stuff. There's lots of microphone. Really?
Yeah.
So now I have an additional advantage over you, standing up higher and half hidden. Okay. All right, so we have this malfunction. Money is supposed to be society's expression of gratitude that says, thank you for doing this valuable thing. But instead, the activities where you can make the most money are not in doing a valuable thing for the earth. In fact, the way to make the most money is to destroy all that is good and beautiful on this planet. You can't make that much money by protecting forests from clear cuts, but you can make a lot of money if you invent a faster way to clear cut the forests. You can't make much money lobbying for new protections on the environment, but you can make a lot of money if you're an effective lobbyist to remove protections for the environment. There's not a lot of money in being an activist and going to Brazil to try and laying down your body in front of the bulldozers to stop the road from being built into the indigenous tribal areas, right? Are you going to get rich doing that? No. But if you are if you're the bank that finances the building of that road, then there's a lot of money in that. So we have a money system today that isn't doing what it's supposed to do. Now, many of you are activists in various realms, and you may have noticed, in whatever field you're in, that when you ask, why is this happening on Earth? Why are we building more and more prisons? Why I can name any of them. Why is standardized testing taking over the school system? Why are any industry that you're examining, any area of activism, you ask why is this happening, you go down a couple levels of why, and you very often get to money. Somebody's making a profit from it. And therefore it's very easy to affirm that saying that money, or at least the love thereof, is the root of all evil. Because it seems that that's part of the problem everywhere you look. So in my book I ask, why should that be? Why does money have this effect? Because money really, all it is it's a social agreement. Everybody, like a dollar bill doesn't have any intrinsic value, really. Much less the bits in computers. That most money is just electronic bits. Why is it so powerful? It's only because of our interpretation of those symbols. And that power comes from our agreements. So we have a social agreement that pushes us toward the destruction of all that is good and necessary for life on this planet. And why should that be? And why couldn't we make another set of agreements? And I think that this is a really fundamental problem. Because, like I said, you trace back anything, why is this happening? You get to money. And you realize that whatever your area of activism is, you're swimming upstream against the money system. Somebody who wants to make a profit is going to come and clear-cut that for us. There's always pressure against you from money. And how can we change that? How can we make money this social affirmation of, yes, this is valuable? How can we make that aligned with what truly is valuable? Or even make it aligned with what's sacred? What is sacred today? What's becoming sacred to us? What's sacred to you? And does that have to be the enemy of self-interest, of monetary self-interest? Could you imagine a world where the things that are really necessary, that you can do those things and you will be supported financially, and you don't have to fight against the money power and all the fear that goes along with it, just to do what your heart tells you to do, just to serve other beings? Like, could we imagine a system like that? And so that's the starting point of sacred economics. All right, so I'm just going to describe a little bit about how money works and what the problem with money is. And it actually goes all the way down to the bottom of the way money is created and the way money circulates in our system. A lot of people kind of know the basics of the story now, but I'll go, if you're familiar with it, just kind of play along. Money is created as debt today. Base money, what they call M0, is created when the Federal Reserve purchases a security on the open market, like a government bond. So it creates, say, $1 billion, and now it owns treasury bonds, say, or mortgage-backed face value because there's interest on these things. So the Fed's balance sheet is always more than the amount of money it's created. On the level of the money that we use, that you have in your checking account, your savings account, it works kind of the same way. A bank gives you a loan and creates that money basically out of thin air. It types a number in, $1 million for you. There's your account. It didn't transfer that $1 million from its vault or from anywhere else, but it created that money X and Y. So now there's new money there, $1 million in your account. But that's not the end of the story, because that you owe the money back to the bank. You owe the bank not just $1 million, but maybe over 10 years, maybe you owe $2 million back to the bank. And that's not a problem, because you are a responsible person with a good business plan, and you're going to use that $1 million to build a widget factory, and you're going to make $3 million. You're going to pay back $2 million, and you're going to be a millionaire yourself. Great. Where are you going to, so that's where you're going to get that extra $1 million that you owe the bank? You're going to basically earn it from each other. Or you could say you're going to take it from somebody else. And if you're producing things that somebody else needs, that's good, right? They're willingly giving you that money, and all's peachy keen and fine, okay? But there's a little problem here. The problem is that all money is created this way. So everybody in this room has $1 million. Everybody in this room owes me $2 million. So what does that mean? That means that everybody in this room is going to have to somehow get an extra $1 million from everybody else in this room. Which means that fundamentally you're all in competition with each other. Now, if that were the end of the story, then at the end of however many years, half of you would have to go bankrupt. The only way to prevent that from happening is if, by the time the loans come due, I've lent even more money into existence to pay back the debts. And that new money comes with even more debt attached to it. But that's okay, because when that comes due, I'll have lent you even more money. More and more and more forever. So it works as long as the economy is growing. As long as people can keep coming to me with their business plan to build a widget factory. And here's my plan, Charles, to make $2 million or $3 million. So as long as there's more goods and services that can be created and circulated and sold, everything works fine. In other words, as long as there's economic growth, everything works fine. It stops working when the economy stops growing. When the economy stops growing, lending can't happen. No one's coming to me with a business plan anymore. So I'm not going to lend anybody any money, because you're not going to make $2 million when the economy is stagnant. And so that's why politicians, whether they're liberals or conservatives, they all are trying to, they're all saying the solution to our economic situation, the solution to unemployment, the solution to the concentration of wealth is to grow the economy. Everybody's in favor of growing the economy. At the same time, the radical fringe of environmentalists is telling us we can't grow anymore. The earth can't sustain any more of our growth. And so we've reached an impasse. Even if we try to keep growing, we still can't keep growing, because there just isn't that much more oil that we can drill. We can't keep increasing the fish catch every year, because the fisheries are dying out. We can't keep cutting down more and more lumber and making more board feet with lumber, because the forests can't sustain any more logging, and the topsoil can't sustain any more mining and runoff, and ecosystem is beginning to crack under the strain of making more and more and more stuff. Well, what about services? Maybe we could grow the economy of services. This is running out of room for growth too, and but it's a little bit more subtle the way that works. And just I don't want to get too dry here. So let me just tell you how I began asking this question. I moved to suburbia when I was in my late 20s. I'd been living abroad, and I moved to suburbia. And I had like this idea that I was going to have real community. I was going to know all my neighbors. You know, we were gonna do stuff together and make things together. And it was going to be like this kind of little utopia. And I remember what suburbia was like when I was a kid. And I wanted that for my kids. I wanted my kids to go outside and play with other kids and have like their gang, you know, and just be outdoors all the time, and cowboys and Indians, or whatever the modern equivalent is, and pick up games of baseball. But there was none of that in this neighborhood that I moved into. And I would go for walks. I'd walk around and around the neighborhood that had hundreds of young families with lots of kids, but there was no one outside. And there was a giant playground in the middle of the neighborhood with a ballpark and everything, and it was empty, except sometimes you'd see a young mother like pushing her 2-year-old or her 3-year-old on the swing, but there weren't kids playing outside. I thought, what happened? And the neighbors hardly knew each other. What happened? When I was a kid, we knew everybody on the street, and every yard was my yard. I could go to anybody's yard, except for the mean lady. Right, you had one of them, right? Maybe like you didn't go in her yard, but pretty much like, we could even go pretty much in everybody's house. Everybody knew who you were, everybody knew your parents, you knew their parents, everybody kind of knew each other's stories. And the neighborhood I moved back into didn't have any of that. I'm like, what happened? What happened to community? Why don't people know each other anymore? On my street now, people don't even know the first name of half the people on the street. And we know nothing about each other. What happened? And I realized what happened to community was that it got converted into money. Because what services are, economically defined, are something that you pay for. Something that you pay somebody to do for you. So, what happened to my neighborhood? Well, when I was a kid, you never paid for childcare. Neighbors all watched each other's kids. Some moms stayed home, some worked. If you worked, then your kids could just go to the neighbors after school, no big deal. You weren't going to go over to your neighbor and say, how much do I owe you for childcare? I mean, the kids were just playing outside. Now we pay for that, which means that we don't need our neighbors. Because I pay for it, right? When I was a kid, to some extent, neighbors would help each other out with projects. If you were building something, like putting in a garden, you'd borrow a rototiller, you wouldn't rent it from the rental company. People would help each other out. People would cut their own lawns, and if some old lady couldn't cut her own lawn, you would help her cut that lawn. So lawn service was not a big economic category back then. People didn't pay for cooking. Mom went to the supermarket and bought raw ingredients and cooked. I didn't pay Mom for that. She didn't give me a bill when I turned 18. So, you go back another generation or two, well, we didn't pay for recreation, right? All the kids just got together and we made our own games. We didn't pay for video games. We didn't pay for adventure. We didn't pay for play. I would wander off with my friends. We'd go for miles and miles, out into the abandoned quarry, where we'd stand at the cliff, and drop stuff over the edge, and all kinds of other safe things. Go swimming unsupervised, and we had adventures. And today, adventures has become something you can sell. Like my kids, despite my best efforts to stop them, they would play these video games where basically the game consists of you go and have an adventure, or you watch a TV show where it's a series of adventures, the Pokemon series. So you're paying for the adventures, in a virtual world that are off limits today. Where you know, I could get my kids taken away from me if someone accused me of child neglect for letting them run around unsupervised, you know. So basically and you go back some more generations, you know, 2 or 3 generations ago, every town of maybe 10,000 people had its own marching band. Like, entertainment was something that people created without paying for, to a large extent. People would get together and sing. And everywhere in the world that I've been where people are less technological and they don't have, you know, iPods and recorded music, they sing a lot more. And they have their own dramas, their own puppet shows, you know, their own, people create culture. And so all of this, through technology and through other changes, has become something that we pay for today. And that means economic growth. So if you come to me and say, Charles, I'd like $1 million, and I'm going to use $1 million to teach people how to cook again. I'm going to train people how to cook, and we're going to organize a neighborhood child care co-op, and we're going to start doing things for each other so we don't pay for them anymore. I'll be like, that sounds beautiful, but how are you going to pay me back? You're not creating new services. In fact, you're reducing the amount of services that are necessary. But if you come to me and you say, hey, Charles, here's a neighborhood I found, a place where people still take care of each other's kids. And I don't think they should, because they're not trained professionals in childcare. So I'm going to crack down. I have my friends in the legislature. They're going to pass a new law, and I'm going to open a daycare center there. And here's how much money I'm going to make. Okay, there's a way I can lend money into existence. So basically, I'm just painting a big picture of the progressive conversion of the world into money. The conversion of nature into goods, and the conversion of relationships into services. The crisis that we're facing today is happening because there is no more room for growth, at least not fast enough to keep pace with the necessity for economic growth to make the money system work. When it stops working, then debt rises faster than income. Wealth polarizes, concentrates in fewer and fewer hands, and everything falls apart. And that's what we're seeing today. So, and it's an impasse, because how are we going to keep it going? Do we want to keep it going? If the only solution is, let's find a way to convert more of nature into stuff, and find more things we can still pay for, like maybe touch. People shouldn't be allowed to touch each other unless they're a licensed massage therapist. Or how about advice from a wise person? Well, maybe if you're not a licensed psychologist, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. And so if in case some of you were here to get rich, I can give you a business plan that has worked for thousands of years, which is basically you find something that people do without money, you take it away, and you sell it back to them. Classically, this happened with land, where you find some place where there's subsistence peasants or indigenous hunter-gatherers, and you say, sorry, you don't actually own this land. I own this land, you see, here's my deed. And they say, what's a deed? We've farmed this land for 30 generations. You say, sorry, you're trespassing. This is my land. Here's some guys with guns to prove it. And you have to pay rent now. So I take it away and then sell it back. And that's what the enclosure movement is all about. And so, if you want to get rich, you can find something that people still do for themselves. And you can take it away by force, or you can just kind of culturally make it uncool, or you can make people too busy to actually do it for themselves or each other anymore, or scare people, intimidate them into, for example, not trusting their own bodies and requiring expertise. And so you can analyze so many different things from this perspective. Okay. So that's the nature of the crisis. And it generates a lot of the horrors that we see today as investment capital desperately seeks some way to keep its return on investment, to keep, there's an organic pressure from within the system to keep growing somehow. And on the level of the investor, it's this search for returns. Like, well, maybe gold mines in Colombia, maybe we can get some returns there. Like some virgin territory that hasn't been converted yet into money. In the Congo, for example, where there's, the pygmies, they're hunter-gatherers, and they're on this rainforest, which is the second largest rainforest on Earth, next to the Amazon, and with the silverback gorillas there and everything. But guess what? There's a lot of minerals under that land. So there's a little room for growth there. Even if we go all out in exploiting those last little remnants, even then, the system can't last too much longer. But the longer it lasts, the worse it is. So, one way to look at that is that the crisis that we're seeing is really good news. The money crisis, which has temporarily kind of gone away, but not really. Back a few generations ago, when a recession, like in the 50s and the 60s, economic growth would be 5, 6, 7% after that. And today, there isn't room for that kind of growth to happen. So we have a crisis that won't go away. And I think that well, the reason that that's good news is that when things fall apart, then the space is clear to create something new. When things are still working, then people are usually reluctant to try anything really new. You might have noticed this in your personal life, even. People you know, like the alcoholic. If he can still keep in the whiskey somehow, and his health hasn't fallen apart yet, and his marriage hasn't fallen apart yet, hey man, it's working. And maybe you can say, hey, this isn't going to last forever, so you're going to have to stop drinking someday. And go, yeah, you're right, but that realization isn't going to last more than a day or two until things really fall apart. And that's what we're seeing happen today. Things are falling apart in a way that can't be ignored. We can still pretend that normal is going to come back. It hasn't quite gotten to the point where the majority of people can't pretend that normal is still here or normal is coming back. But it's getting really close to that point. So what I write about then, I think we have this kind of golden opportunity to create radically different systems that don't have the effect that our money system has today, which basically is to force us into competition with each other, to create anxiety, to create scarcity, and to necessitate endless economic growth. That all comes down to the money system. The money system doesn't exist in isolation. It is related to even deeper things. And I kind of, I'm a little wary of any kind of universal pronouncement, like, all we have to do is change money and then everything will be fine. Like, well, why do we have this money system? Like, what does it reflect inside ourselves? What does it reflect in our psychology? What does it reflect in our mythology, our science, what we believe about the world? What's the nature of reality? The money system is part of an entire civilization. And that is what is changing. Our entire civilization is what is changing. And this is something that we can feel underneath all of the crises of our time. that they're not something that we're just going to kind of tweak something and fix something and then back on our upward ascent. That would be maybe the difference between progressive and radical, where the progressive is saying, yeah, we've come a long way, we've made a lot of progress, and we need to continue making progress. We can't backslide. We need to continue making progress. Whereas the radical is saying, there's something at the root that's wrong, and we need a change that goes all the way down to the root. And that's why I think more and more people are becoming radical as they see that the flaws in the system go all the way to the bottom. So I'm just going to quickly tie in our money system to some of these deeper myths. I'll call them myths or stories. Every culture, well, almost every culture, has myths or stories that answer the deep questions in life, such as, who am I? Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? What is it to be human? What's important in life? Where did it come from? Where are we going? This isn't just philosophy. If the changes that we needed to make were more superficial, then this kind of philosophy might be a waste of time. But all of our institutions, all of our systems, including the money system, are built on the answers that our culture gives to these questions. The answer to the question, for example, who are you, is that you are this discrete, separate being among other separate beings in a world that is also separate from you. Biology says you are the expression of your DNA that programs you to maximize your reproductive self-interest against all those competitors out there. So the more that you control, the more resources you control, the better it is for you, and your genes program you to do that. They program you to be selfish. That's what biology, this is actually somewhat obsolete biology, but that's still the message that you get from it. Physics says, yeah, that's right, yeah, you are mass operating according to these laws of physics that govern your constituent parts, and these are expressed again through your genes and through your biology, and there's a world of force out there that is separate from you, and these gigantic forces that are beyond your control, that you can insulate yourself from them if you can muster some force on your own behalf, which human beings can do better than any other animal because we have technology and have harnessed natural forces, and more become the lords and masters of nature. Okay, religion, same thing. You are, it says, and again, this might be obsolete religion, but it says you are a skin-encapsulated soul wandering around, and there's some other souls out there, and there's God up there, and again, separate. Psychology, or this ego, or this mind, or this consciousness, that's the real you, and you're separate from your body, and you're separate from these other egos and consciousnesses out there. So, separate, right? They all agree. Well, that separation is exactly what money embodies too. More for you is less for me. We're in competition with each other. Your good fortune has nothing to do with me, and it might even be my bad fortune, but your bad fortune, well, that's one less competitor for me. Our money reifies that, which is different from the economic system that prevailed up until a few thousand years ago, which was the gift system. So most people, whoever lived on Earth, lived in gift economies. And in a gift economy, you don't hoard possessions. You don't keep any more than you need. Why? Well, for one reason, you are intimately connected to the people around you and you want to share. But also, it doesn't do you any good to hoard them. Because in those societies, status and security come from how much you give, The more you give, the more generous you are, the more you share, the more people want to take care of you too. Besides, possessions are a burden, especially if you're nomadic. And they rot, even if you're an agriculturalist, you know, if you have more than a certain amount of grain, it's going to spoil. It would be much better to share that. And then when somebody else has more than they need, they can share it with you. So in those societies, what seems to be a self-evident truth for us, that what happens to you doesn't really affect what happens to me, right? You guys walk out of this room, you could, God forbid, break your leg, and is that going to hurt me? Does that affect me in the slightest? The logic of separation says no. Kids can be eating dirt in Haiti because they're so hungry. Does that affect me? No, not in the logic of separation. The Pacific Ocean is getting radioactive from Fukushima. Does that affect me? No. We live near the Atlantic Ocean. Right? Who cares what happens to somebody else? That's what the logic of separation tells us. And our money system embodies that logic. It makes it true in our experience. Another basic myth of our civilization, I call it the story of the people. And it says, the answer is, you know, what are we here for? What is humanity? What's the human story? And it says that we started out as these naked, helpless, ignorant animals, and then we developed science and technology, replacing superstition and ritual with real knowledge. And because of that, because of our big brains, we became the masters of nature. We transcended natural limitations, we conquered diseases, we came to live in comfort and security. And where next? Well, the sky is the limit. We will conquer all disease. We will conquer even death. We will synthesize our food. We will rise above nature. We will colonize the stars. We won't need nature anymore. That was the myth. Nanotechnology and genetic engineering will extend our control to the microscopic level, and nuclear power or some other power source will extend our control to the galactic level. And that was the story. It was a story of conquest. And you can see that money fits into that story too, because it converts all of the world into property. It makes everything ours. So, the collapse of money, the crisis of the money system, reflects a deeper crisis. It's the crisis in our basic stories, our story of self and our story of the people. Both of these are falling apart. No one in this room even resonates with them anymore. You know, maximizing your individual self-interest, or participating in the conquest of nature. Like, it almost seems like a cartoon. But 2 generations ago, yeah, you know, 2 generations ago, a bright young person was going to be like, yeah, I'm going to be an atomic engineer. I'm going to be a NASA scientist. I'm going to invent better ways to conquer nature. I mean, I read books when I was a kid saying, by the year 2000, there may be no more insects on Earth. Because thanks to miracle chemicals such as DDT, we will wipe out the insects. And this was actually a fairly enlightened book, because it said, well, there are beneficial insects. They do pollination and stuff, but we will come up with technological substitutes for those. And this was like, yeah, but this was considered to be a good thing, you know? This was like, yeah, of course, you know? We're going to take over everything. And that project is foundering today. On one level, our consciousness has just kind of gotten past that, but also it just hasn't worked very well. You know, the program to create a utopia on Earth through controlling nature is backfiring. in more and more obvious ways. And life hasn't kept getting better the way it was supposed to. You could believe it in the 60s that we were on the right track. We had conquered all of the dread diseases. Cancer is next. Heart disease is next. By the year 2000, no more disease. No more poverty. We were going to engineer that out of existence. Through material and social engineering, we were going to lick all these problems. But since 1973, maybe it all peaked in 1973. Since then, we have less leisure, we're sicker, we're not as happy. You name it. Things have, the technological program has failed. So, money, which embodies these deep myths, and much else beside it, are all falling apart. In our consciousness, all of us, in one way or another, have already moved on to a new story of the self and a new story of the people. The new story of the self being the connected self, the understanding that we're all in it together, the understanding that what happens to you is happening to me also, and that everything I do to the world, I'm doing to myself. Mystics have taught us this for a long time, and now this awareness is infecting mass consciousness, even if it's just on an intellectual level. People believe this now. It's not crazy anymore to say that. The new story of the people, instead of being the conquerors of nature, we're beginning to see ourselves as the partners of nature. So our consciousness is changing, but our systems, our institutions, are still based on these old stories. And they have a lot of momentum. And they also affect our consciousness too. They pull us into their world. And you may have experienced this, maybe if you participated in Occupy or something like that, or some of you are older, maybe you were, doing some cool stuff in the 60s, and maybe you were a flower child. Was anyone a flower child? Was anybody a hippie? And so there you were, and it was obvious in 1967 that money is going to be obsolete in 5 years. And so much else. War. There will be no more war because it's just not aligned with the shift in consciousness, man. It was obvious. And I think that you were seeing something true, actually. But then, after being involved in Occupy maybe, or after being on the commune, or after being in Woodstock, or after some experience, even if it's a personal thing, like a near-death experience, or being next to a loved one as they're dying, something that connects you with the true nature of being, that really love is the only thing that's real, and that we're not separate, then you come back into the world of separation, and it kind of pulls you back. That's what happens to me, at least. And that experience and that clarity becomes really nothing more than a memory. But it also is something that lives on inside me. Anyway, the systems haven't caught up. So right now, there's a couple things that we can do. One is to begin creating new systems. New systems that are aligned with the new story of the self and the new story of the people. Systems that embody our knowledge that what we do to the other, we're doing to ourselves. Systems that embody our desire to be the partners of nature and not just the takers from nature. The desire to create together with nature. our understanding that we are not separate from nature, we're not its conquerors, but that we're part of nature. So systems that are ecological, systems in which waste is food, in which everything we produce is usable by some other being, and that's usable by some other being, and it passes along and it comes back to us, which you could say is the circle of the gift. So the challenge today is to bring the attitude, the spirit, the cosmology of the gift into our systems. Gift economies prevailed in societies of only a few hundred people. How do you do it in a society of billions of people? What would money have to look like if it embodied the qualities of the gift? What would an economy look like if it were ecological? And these questions all have answers. And I think that it's important, and I'll mention a few of them, but first I want to say it's important to work on these solutions, even though before things fall apart, these solutions will probably be marginal. But it's still important to prepare them so that when things do fall apart, they're ready, and then they can explode. They can catch like wildfire. It's also important to I'm not sure how theoretical I want to be here. To protect what's left of nature and culture and relationship and community, and to reclaim whatever we can of it. Because by doing so, well, for one, it's kind of practice in living in the new story, in living according to the knowledge that what happens to any being is happening to me. Also, it preserves some of this wealth so that it won't get eaten up by the money system. So any forest that you save, any road that you stop, any culture that you can somehow protect from being commoditized, that means less economic growth. If you participate in reskilling workshops and teach people in the inner city how to cook again, or you yourself learn how to cook again, or to do anything, to garden, to do anything that doesn't require money, to create systems of sharing, reciprocity, time banks, all of these things, they're actually bad for the economy. My street at home, we have like maybe 30 houses and 30 lawnmowers. And each lawnmower is used 10 hours a year. Like the whole street could get by with 2 lawnmowers. But if we did that, if I created a system for that to happen, that's 28 fewer lawnmowers that are going to get bought and serviced. Like, that's a lot of that. People are going to be unemployed in the lawnmower factory if everybody does that. So, by preventing or reclaiming things from the money economy, we actually hasten the demise of the system. We hasten the crisis, but we also make it less severe because there's still some wealth left. So that's important too. Now I'm going to talk about a couple aspects of what money would look like if it embodied the new story of the people and the new story itself, if it embodied our understanding of our connectedness. Because I've been talking a long time. It takes a long time to get through all this and to touch on different bases. But I'll just say 1 or 2 things and then I'll just open it up to questions and stuff. So I mentioned that one characteristic of a gift is that you don't hoard it. In gift culture, if you want to be, like in some of these Polynesian cultures and in the Pacific Northwest, if you wanted to be a chief, then you had to give away more stuff than anybody else. So power and what we would think of as wealth came from generosity, not from how much you had. I read an anthropologist writing about the Bushmen in Kalahari, the Khum, and they had a word for wealth called kai, which meant beads and pretty things, you know, that like valuables. And the word for a rich person was a kaiha. And so the anthropologist said to his informant, Zoma, he said, what is it that makes a person a kaiha? Would it be if you had a lot of kai in your hut? Would you be a kaiha then? And Zoma said, no, you don't get it. We call someone a kaiha if he makes many goods circulate. Someone who gives a lot of kai to other people, that's a kaiha. That's what a wealthy person is. So wealth comes from sharing. But in our system, because of interest, wealth comes from accumulation. And I'm only going to share with you if you're going to give me even more back. And if you don't, I'll sue you. Right? We're separate. That's separationism. Well, could we re-engineer money so that it doesn't have that characteristic? All the things that I described about money come from it. All of the damaging things about it come from the way it's created as interest-bearing debt. Well, what if it were created in a different way? For example, what if money had negative interest built into it instead of positive interest? So you have, say you have $1 billion and it decays, it goes bad, and in a year it's only going to be worth, I don't know, 900 million, and in another year it'll be worth only 810 million, and so forth, and it decays in value. Well then, I'm not going to stay rich by keeping it and holding on to it. It would be to my advantage to give you a zero-interest loan. I would be better off that way than if I held it for myself. Just like that primitive farmer who he's got many children and they work hard and he works hard and he's got a good piece of land and he's got more grain than anyone can eat in his family. And if he keeps that grain, maybe I'm him, okay? And I've got a huge pile of grain. And how am I going to be, even if I'm a selfish bastard and I want to maximize my power, I can't do that by just keeping the grain. It's to my advantage to say, here, everybody take a bushel of this. And when I need grain, I will ask for a bushel of grain. Maybe next year my harvest won't be so good and yours will be. Or actually, in real gift societies, I wouldn't even keep track of how much I gave. But let's just say that I have a huge pile of grain and I'm going to give it to everybody. I don't have the leverage to say, well, I'm not going to give you a bushel unless you give me 2 bushels back. Because you can just say, screw you, you can sit on your grain and let it rot. I don't have that leverage because it decays. Money is different, though. The money that we have today is different. I can invest it in a risk-free investment that will at least maintain its value against inflation. And if I'm wealthy and powerful enough, pretty much anything's a risk-free investment because the government's going to bail it out if it fails. So the rich get richer by having, not by sharing. But if money decayed, it would be like grain. And the system, so that's kind of like the conceptual view, and in the book I get down to some of the more economic nitty-gritty stuff. So now you come to me with your business plan, and I have $1 million. I say I'm the bank or something, I have $1 million, and it's going to decay in value. You come to me with a business plan, and you don't have to think of something that's going to earn $2 million over time for me to give you that loan. Because you don't have, I'd be happy if you paid me back just $1 million, rather than to keep it and let it decay. Basically, it allows money to circulate in the absence of economic growth. Today, lending only happens if there's economic growth. But this would allow money to circulate in a steady state economy without even changing the banking system that much. All you have to do is have a liquidity tax on deposits in the Federal Reserve. And everything else flows from that. And you have to have currency that expires somehow too. Another thing that does is it reverses the discounting of future cash flows. So today, say I have a forest. And this is actually based on a true story. Say I have a forest. I'm the CEO of a company and we have a forest, and I have a choice. I can either clear cut that baby right now for an immediate profit of $1 billion, or I can log it sustainably forever and make $10 million a year. What do I do? What would you do? Clear cut it and destroy it forever, or log it sustainably forever for $10 million a year? Well, you know, maybe, I mean, if I clear cut it, that $1 billion, I could make more than $10 million a year on interest. So it's to my economic advantage to do that. But suppose I'm a nice guy, and I say, no, I love the little squirrelies and the horned owls, and I'm going to keep it there. But then, the corporate raider says, guess what? Your company's poorly managed, because you have an asset that could be generating a cash flow of $30 million a year, but you're only generating $10 million a year from it. And that's why your stock is undervalued. So the corporate raider goes to the investment bank, borrows enough money to buy my company, sells that forest, clear cuts it, increases company revenues, therefore increasing the stock price, sells it out again, and makes money. And the only way I can stop the hostile takeover is by cutting down the forest and preemptively raising my stock price. And this actually happened with, I think it was Pacific Lumber or somebody. But that is all because of the interest-bearing quality of money. Say you were the president of Earth with dictatorial powers. Okay? You, president of the world. And I come in my alien spaceship and I say, let me make you a deal. I will buy Earth from you. We're going to build an amusement park out of the raw materials. And I'll buy Earth from you for $10 quadrillion. Why? The interest alone will be many times gross world product. It's to your financial advantage. Would you say yes to that deal? Well, you probably wouldn't, but collectively we are saying yes to exactly that deal. We're destroying the planet for money. We're helplessly saying yes to it because that choice is built into the money system. So the idea of negative interest, which I didn't invent, by the way, it was first articulated by Silvio Gesell, who was an economist in the early 20th century, and John Keynes supported it, Irving Fisher, and it keeps cropping up. But that's one of 6 or 7 pillars of sacred economics. And there are some other things too, like the recovery of the commons, the internalization of costs. Like today, you can make money by polluting and passing the costs on to somebody else, usually future generations. You shouldn't be able to do that, right? That's the business model of somebody else pays, you get the profits. So that should be very, very expensive to pollute. And these kind of green taxes, and there's other proposals that allow that to happen. Another piece is economic localization and local currencies and things like that, which I can talk about more maybe. But I've kind of given you this big picture, and I'm going to just open it up to some questions. The book, both of those books are also available online, so that you don't have to pay for them. And one of the themes that I write about is the reclamation of the commons, including the intellectual commons. You know, where it really feels kind of obsolete to say, okay, here's this information, and it wouldn't cost me anything to give it to you, but I'm going to make you pay anyway because I have this enforcement apparatus of copyright protection behind me. Because, and why doesn't it feel right to do that? It's really because I received all this information as a gift too. From other thinkers, from moments of inspiration, just from the conversations around me. Lewis Mumford says, a patent is a device by which one person profits from the complicated process of social creation that results in new technology. So I'd like to, do what feels good. And I get, so that's another part of the vision is gift economics. And the one woman, the lawyer, is that you? No, who's that? Ah, darn. Okay, well, I'll talk about that in a few minutes then. The monk gave him his bowl, his begging bowl, which he had, used for 20 years. It wasn't a purchase. He didn't say, I'm going to buy that bowl off you. But that act of generosity, you can feel how it changes the world, can't you? You can feel the ripple effect of that. And everybody has that power. That's the letters that people write me, There's one guy, I think he's in Cleveland. He says that he's become kind of this, you know how Batman goes out at night and fights crime? Well, every night, he goes out with a car full of food and sleeping bags and stuff, and he just drives around and gives stuff away to homeless people, gives them rides to homeless shelters. He just does that for 4 hours every night. And his wife, doesn't support this. So for a while, he was telling her that he was going out and getting drunk and gambling, because it was more okay to squander money like that than it was to actually go and help people. But that's what he does. He just goes out and spends all night helping people. It's not that he's rich, It's any money he has, that's what he'll do with it. And there's that voice, what if I get taken advantage of, What if I'm not okay? And sometimes you're not okay. But when I hear stories like that, I feel encouraged to do it too. And when I see somebody being that generous, then I'm like, yeah, I can do it too. It kind of sheds this light that draws out my own light. And I think that that's really the power that's going to change the world. Because rationally speaking, our situation is quite hopeless without that kind of power. So, thank you.
I'd like to make a couple quick announcements. With the work group that helped to bring this arrangement together, we're actually working on some local alternatives. We're trying to promote right now the Ripple system, which can be found by going to villages.cc. It's a system of exchanging services without any currency. And we're also trying to start a project where we map economic alternatives in the area. But thank you so much, Charles, for coming. That was really wonderful. And I think, it definitely helped to hear that for a lot of people. So,
yeah.
thank you, audience.